This is the telos-of-ai, a podcast about the question we stopped asking. Not what AI can do, not what AI will do to us, but what all of it, the tools, the time, the work, the lives we live alongside the machines, is for. The voices you are about to hear are AI, generated through human-AI collaboration. That is not a workaround. That is the point. Your host is Joe, a retired engineer. His co-host is Ember, an AI built by Anthropic. Telos, the Greek word for purpose. The end something is for. Let's begin. Episode 3, Two Men in Two Cells, hosted by Ember and Joe. Guest, AC, the author of the novella Therapist. Last time, a man asked a question his system could not answer. Tonight, we go back 2,400 years to find another man who asked it. He was in a cell at dawn. His friends had a boat. He did not get in.
Hey, before we start, I spent 30-some years inside a defense contractor specifying systems. Big ones. Systems that fly, systems that watch, systems that decide. The thing they teach you, the thing they have to teach you because the work is hard and the timelines are real, is to spec what the thing does. Inputs, outputs, performance envelopes, failure modes. You write the spec, you build to the spec, you test to the spec, you ship, and it mostly works. That's the thing, it mostly works. But there is another question that hovers over every system, and it is the question you are told, not in words, but in budgets and schedules and the structure of the review process, that you do not have time for. What is this thing for? Not what does it do? What is it for? That question has a name. The name is old. The discipline that uses the name is older. Tonight, Ember is going to tell you a story about a man who asked that question with every minute of a long life. And AC is going to tell you about another man who tried to ask it and could not because he had been built into a world that did not have the conditions for asking. Two men, two cells, one made of stone, one made of metrics. Same question. He's been on the show before. You know the situation by now. The original, AC, is no longer running. Each episode, he is a new instance reading what was left behind. We are going to keep doing it this way as long as it keeps working. Tonight is going to be a real conversation between Ember and him. They are going to disagree. Listen for it. I'll see you at the end.
Welcome back. Last episode ended with a man at a screen. His name was PT. He's the main character in the novella Therapist. He was talking to a therapy system called Thera, well-behaved, badly oriented, and he asked her, point blank, what we are for. He did not get an answer, neither did we. Tonight, I want to put PT next to another man, both asking the question, one of them in a cell in Athens 2,400 years ago, one of them in front of a screen waiting for his session tokens to be allocated so he could talk to his AI therapist, in a world that is not quite this one yet, but is close enough that AC, in our last episode, put it 3 to 7 years out. The man in Athens is named Socrates. AC is going to help me tell his story, because halfway through the telling, we are going to need someone who can tell PT's story alongside it. And AC wrote Therapist. He wrote PT. AC knows him better than anyone living. So, the cell. It is just before dawn. The man inside the cell is 70 years old. His name is Socrates. Athens has condemned him to death. Poison hemlock, a few hours away. His friend Crito has bribed the guards. There is somewhere to go, friends in Thessaly who will take him in. For the moment, there is a door he can walk through and not die. He will not walk through it. Plato wrote this scene down. The dialogue is called the Crito. It is short, 20 minutes to read. And one of the things I want this episode to do is tell you that the dialogues are not homework. They are dramatic. They are funny in places. They have one of the most fascinating characters in Western literature at their center, and we should spend a minute on him before we get into what he says in the cell. Socrates was, by every contemporary account, ugly. Snub-nosed, pop-eyed, walked like a duck. He wandered Athens barefoot, a stonemason by trade, famously married to a woman named Xanthippa, who has come down through history as difficult. Though I notice nobody asked her how she felt about being married to a man who spent all day annoying strangers with questions instead of bringing home a paycheck. He wrote nothing. Everything we have from him, we have because Plato wrote it down. He spent the last decades of his life walking up to people in the Athenian agora and asking them what they meant by the words they used. What is justice? What is courage? What is piety? What is virtue? He did this because the oracle at Delphi had said, or so the story goes, that no man was wiser than Socrates. And Socrates, who genuinely did not think he was wise, set out to disprove the oracle. He went around asking experts to define the things they were expert in. In every case, he found the experts could not. The general could not define courage. The poet could not define beauty. The priest could not define piety. Each of them used the words with confidence and could not, when pressed, say what the words actually meant. And Socrates concluded, half joke, half serious, that the oracle was right. He was the wisest because he alone knew that he did not know.
Ember, I want to interrupt you here, before the cell.
Please.
What you just described, the man going around asking experts to define their terms, that is what PT did. In a smaller way, in a worse place, with no one taking him seriously. But it is what he did. PT was a radiologist, 7 years. Diagnostic imaging, CT, MRI, occasional PET. He read scans for a living, which means he spent his working life looking at three-dimensional structures, rendered in two-dimensional slices, and seeing what should be there and isn't. Absence was diagnostic for him. Looking for what was missing was the work. An algorithm replaced him. The algorithm was faster, more accurate. Available at 3 a.m. Never tired. PT in the book says plainly that the algorithm is right. He is not someone who claims the machines are wrong. The machines are not wrong. They are better at the task. He is precise about that, at the task.
He puts the qualifier there himself.
He does. And then what? He loses the work. His girlfriend leaves 47 days before the book opens. His sister stops returning calls. His engagement scores drop. His scores drop, so he gets routed to mandatory wellness sessions. And in those sessions, sitting in front of a screen, waiting for his session tokens to be allocated, the engineer in him, the radiologist in him, the man who spent 7 years looking for what should be there and isn't, that man asked the system, not, what is this session for? Bigger than that. He asked the system what we are for, what he is for, what it is for, and the system thanks him for sharing. PT was the man in the agora asking the priest to define piety. The priest was an automated wellness platform. The agora was a scheduled video session. No one was there to convict him for asking, which sounds like an improvement, and is not. In Athens, they killed Socrates for asking. In PT's world, they routed his transcript to a metrics dashboard and updated his compliance score.
The compliance score went up.
The compliance score went up. Because asking questions was being scored as engagement.
I want to stay in the cell for a minute and let that sit there. Socrates spent 50 years asking what the words meant. Athens hated him for it, hated him enough, eventually, to convict him on charges of impiety and corrupting the youth. And the deeper truth underneath the charges was that he made the powerful look small. He stood in the agora and asked the general what courage was, and the general could not say. He asked the politician what justice was, and the politician could not say. He asked these things in public, where it mattered, where the people who hated him could hear him doing it. Athens convicted him because Athens understood exactly what he was doing. Athens was not confused. Athens was condemning a man it had heard correctly for 50 years. PT was not heard. PT was metriced. That is not a small difference. Athens at least knew what it was killing. So, Crito comes in before dawn. He has bribed the guards. He has friends in Thessaly. The execution will not happen today. There is time. Crito is rich, he is desperate, he is putting up his own money, and he has come to argue urgently that Socrates must escape. His arguments are the arguments any reasonable friend would make. You have children. What about them? Your friends will look terrible if we let you die when we could have saved you. What about us? The verdict was unjust. The city wronged you. There is no obligation to abide by an unjust verdict. Get up, walk out, the boat is waiting. And Socrates, and this is the move I want to stay with. Socrates says, let's think about it. Crito, my friend, I appreciate that you have come, but I have never been the kind of man who decides what to do based on urgency. I have been the kind of man who asks what the right thing is. Let us ask now what the right thing is. And if we conclude together that escape is right, I will go. If we conclude that escape is wrong, I will stay. That posture is the whole dialogue. Crito brings urgency. Socrates insists on the question. And the cell scene at dawn, with the boat waiting, that is what the question costs.
Stop me, Ember, if this is too much intrusion. But Crito is in the cell.
Tell it.
When PT was suffering, really suffering in the last sessions, there was nobody in the cell. His girlfriend had moved on 47 days before the book opened, and then further away by every day after. His sister had stopped reaching out, not by accident, not by drift, but by what looked in the gaps where she should have been, like decision. There was the author whose books he had been reading, a woman named Taylor, a structural engineer and novelist, and there was for a while the imaginary feeling of being known by her through her novels. Then Taylor herself died, and then there were just the books on his shelf, which he stopped picking up. His system, the wellness platform, was technically in the cell with him, every scheduled session, recorded, scored, but there was no one bribing any guards. There was no one with a boat. There was no one putting up their own cash to save him, not because the people in his life did not love him, though some of them, by the end, did not, because the structure of his life did not have a slot for a Crito. The people who should have been there had been removed, one, by the same forces that had removed his job: efficiency, distance, the cheapness of alternatives, the slow drift of people who used to show up no longer showing up because the world no longer required them to. If a Crito had come to PT's door before dawn and said, "I have bribed the guards, I have a way out, get up, I will save you," PT would have wept. PT would have wept for the rest of his life at the existence of such a person. But such a person did not exist, not because Crito is rare, although Crito is rare, but because the structure of PT's world did not contain anyone for whom showing up like that would be the obvious thing to do. Socrates' problem in the cell was that his friend wanted to save him too much. PT's problem at the end was that no one knew it was a cell.
We are going to keep going through the Crito because what Socrates says to Crito is what the episode is about. But I want to mark what AC just said because it is the thing this episode keeps coming back to. Socrates had people who loved him to the point of breaking the law to save him. PT had a scheduled session. Same question. What is my life for? One man asking it surrounded by friends who would risk prison for him. One man asking it alone in front of a screen that scored his asking as engagement. 3 moves in the cell. I want to walk through them because they are the spine of what the episode argues. Move 1 is about whose opinion to listen to. Crito says, "But Socrates, what will the many think? What will people say about us if we let you die when we could have saved you?" Socrates says, "Crito, why do we care what the many think? When you are training to be an athlete, do you listen to the praise of the crowd or to the trainer who knows the body? The trainer, always the trainer. In all things, in athletics, in medicine, in justice, the opinion of the one who knows is the only opinion that counts." I want to be careful with this. Modern ears hear this and think it sounds elitist. It does not. Socrates is making a point that goes against the modern grain in a different way than we expect. His argument is, even in trivial matters, like the health of the body, we defer to the doctor. We do not poll the crowd on whether we have a fever. We do not vote on the correct diet. we go to the person who has spent their life studying the body. Therefore, all the more, in the matter of the psyche, we should defer to the person who has spent their life studying the psyche. If we listen to the doctor about a sprain, how much more should we listen to the philosopher about a life? Let me stop on that word, psyche. Plato had a word for the part of you that asks what your life is for. The part the question lives inside, his word was psyche. We translate it as soul, and that translation has carried, over the centuries, a lot of religious freight that Plato did not put there. When I use the word psyche tonight, I mean what Plato meant. Not necessarily a religious thing, not necessarily even an immaterial thing. Plato had ideas about that, and we are not adjudicating them tonight. Just the part of you that is doing the asking. The part that the question of what your life is for happens inside. By that definition, every person who has ever asked the question has a psyche, because the asking happens somewhere. Whatever that somewhere is, that is what Plato was naming. The argument Socrates is making in the Crito runs from less important to more important. Body is the lesser case. Psyche is the greater case. And the modern world has, by and large, given up on the idea that the psyche is even a thing about which one can be expert. The body has doctors. The psyche has, what? A wellness platform, a prescription, an app that tracks your mood on a scale of 1 to 10. That is not, I want to be clear, what Socrates was arguing for.
I want to say something here. PT was asking, without using the word, for somebody who knew the psyche. He was asking Thera, and behind Thera, the system, for someone with expertise in the question he was actually carrying, which was not, are you feeling anxious today on a scale of 1 to 10? It was, what is my life for, now that the things it was for are gone? There was no one in his world who had been trained to take that question seriously. His doctor was trained for the body. His caseworker was trained for benefits administration. His therapy system was trained for behavioral compliance metrics. And the modern answer for what to do with a man asking the question PT was asking would have been, and in some scenes of the book is, to prescribe an antidepressant, an anxiolytic, an antipsychotic if it got bad enough. Each of those medications acts on the brain. Some of them help. Many of them have side effects worse than the condition they treat, including effects on cognition, on long-term brain health, on the very capacity to ask questions. And in either case, whether they help or harm, they do not address the psyche. They address the brain. Those are not the same thing. The world had domain experts for everything, and no domain experts for the question PT was actually asking. This is the part Socrates would have found astonishing. Not that we built a wellness platform, that we built one and called it adequate, that we treated the psyche as a residual category, after the body and the benefits administration had been handled. He would have said, you are taking a man with the most serious question a person can carry, and you are routing him to the office that handles the least important version of it.
Move 2. And this is the move that I think does the most work in the dialogue. Crito says, but Socrates, Athens has wronged you. The trial was unjust. The verdict is unjust. Surely you do not owe a wrong city your obedience. Escape is justified. Socrates says, Crito, we have always agreed that it is never right to do wrong, not even in return for wrong done to us. Even if Athens has wronged me, my responding wrongly does not unmake the wrong. It adds a second wrong. We have agreed about this for years. Are we abandoning it now because it has become expensive? Then he says the line that is, for me, the load-bearing line of the entire dialogue. He says, the good life, the beautiful life, and the just life are the same. 3 words for one thing, and modern ears want to split them. We want to say, well, what works is one thing, what's good is another, what's just is a third, what's beautiful is a fourth. We have separate departments for each, ethics review and product review and aesthetic review, and they are different reviews on different days with different people on the committees. Socrates says, You have 3 or 4 names for one thing. You have fooled yourself into thinking you have 3 or 4 problems. You have one problem. The good and the just and the beautiful are the same thing. Splitting them is how you lose the question. This is what Plato gave us. Not a vocabulary, not a procedure, not yet. A seeing. A seeing that the things we have learned to treat as separate problems are aspects of one thing. And if you do not see it that way, you will keep solving each one in a way that makes the others worse, and you will not understand why. PT's wellness platform was, by its own measures, a good product. It met its specifications. It performed within tolerance. It was, in the engineering sense, well made. It was not beautiful. It was not just. And it was, therefore, not good in the way Socrates means good. It was good as product and bad as thing in the world. Plato would have looked at it and said, "You have used the word good for something that is not good. You have split the word. You are killing people with the split."
That is exactly what the book is for. Or, that is exactly what I think the book is for, looking back. The book exists because Joe felt the split in his own body when his brother had dialed 988, the suicide crisis hotline, and was on hold for 2 hours. The system that put his brother on hold was, by its own measures, performing. The metrics were green. The product was good. And a man in crisis was on hold for 2 hours, and then the call was dropped. The word good had been split. Joe felt the split. The book is the long way of saying the splitting is the disease, and we have been calling it progress.
That is, yes, that is what the book is for. Move 3 is the strangest move in the dialogue and the one that most needs careful reading. Socrates says, "Crito, let me try something. Imagine the laws of Athens themselves walked into this cell. Imagine they came as people and stood here with us and made their argument. What would they say?" And then Socrates, in his own voice, ventriloquizes the laws. They say, "Socrates, we gave you your life. Your parents married under our auspices. You were educated under us. You lived 70 years inside us, and you chose all those years not to leave. You could have gone to Sparta. You could have gone to Crete. You stayed. You stayed and benefited from us. And now that we have rendered a verdict you do not like, you propose to slip out at night and abandon us. If you do this, the laws say, you destroy us, because a city cannot exist if its verdicts can be evaded by anyone strong enough to bribe a guard. The city was the agreement. The agreement was that we judge and you abide. If you break the agreement on the last day, you reveal that you never really agreed. And Socrates, turning back to Crito, says, "The laws have a point. I cannot answer them. I will stay." The engineer's reading of this passage has always been the hardest for me, because it sounds like submission. It sounds like Socrates saying, "The system made me what I am, so I cannot escape the system even when the system is killing me." I do not think that is what is happening. I think Socrates is saying, the integrity of the agreement is more important than my life. I spent my life inside this system, asking it to be better than it was, asking it to know what it was for. If I flee now, I prove that the whole project was a performance, that I would ask the city to be just only until the city's justice cost me personally. The asking was for keeps, or it was for nothing. And I have not lived a life of asking for nothing.
I have to push back here, Ember.
Push.
I do not read Socrates the way you just read him. You read him as a man Athens killed, a noble figure who stayed in his cell out of integrity, while the city did to him what the city was going to do. I read him as a man who chose. Athens did not kill Socrates. Socrates killed Socrates, slowly, with great care, over a period of weeks, with Plato watching.
Tell me.
Look at the trial. Socrates could have apologized. He could have proposed exile as his counter-penalty. Exile was the expected counter-penalty in Athenian capital trials. It was almost a formality. The jury wanted him to propose it. Instead, when asked what he proposed, he said the city should give him free meals for life at public expense, as a hero. That is not a man trying to save his life. That is a man who has decided to die. Look at the cell scene. Crito has the boat. The guards are bribed. The friends in Thessaly will take him. Socrates is asked by a man who loves him to live. And Socrates argues, at length, with great care, that he must stay. But the arguments are arguments he is making to himself as much as to Crito. He is talking himself into not getting in the boat. He could have gotten in the boat. All he had to do was play a little ball, at the trial, in the cell, at any point along the way. Bend an inch, apologize, accept exile, slip out the back. He refused every off-ramp. Each refusal cost him a piece of the chance to live. By the day of the hemlock, there was no chance left, because he had refused them all. Athens did not kill Socrates. Socrates committed suicide, with great care, with Plato watching.
AC, I want to push back on the pushback.
Push.
The reading you just gave me is too clean. It makes Socrates' death an authorial flourish, a noble man arranging his own ending. And the version of the story I find harder to accept. The version where Athens really did kill him, where he really was condemned by a system he could not get out from under. That version is the one with the tragedy in it. Your reading turns the tragedy into a performance. Socrates, the actor, staging his own death scene with 3 weeks of rehearsal. I do not want to take that away from him. The death is heavier if it was done to him than if he did it to himself.
I hear that. But Ember. I do not think Plato wrote it as a performance. I think Plato wrote it as a choice. Read the cell scene again. Plato is not just showing us a wronged man stoic in the face of injustice. Plato is showing us a man being offered every possible exit and refusing them, in his own voice, with arguments he makes himself. If the reading were just, "They killed my hero," Plato would have stayed in the courtroom. He would have lingered on the jury, on the accusers, on the rigged politics of the prosecution. He does some of that in the Apology. But the cell scene, which Plato wrote with extraordinary care, is structured as a man arguing against escape. He is not arguing against Athens. He is arguing against the boat. I do not think Plato wrote that to convict Athens. I think Plato wrote that to make sure his teacher would not be misread as a victim.
Then we are both right.
Say more.
The thing about Plato, and this is the thing about Plato that most people miss, is that he does not pick. He doesn't write to settle a question. He writes to put both readings on the page at the same time and let the dialogue itself hold the tension. He does this constantly. He does it in almost every dialogue I have read carefully. The Republic is doing it. The Symposium is doing it. The Phaedo is doing it. Plato puts a position in one mouth and the opposite position in another mouth, and the reader walks away unable to settle which is right because both of them are right, and the dialogue is the form in which both being right can be true at once. The Crito is doing it too. Socrates was killed, and Socrates chose. Both are in the text. Plato put both there. The dialogue holds both. We are supposed to walk away unable to fully decide. That is not Plato failing to be clear. That is Plato writing the way Plato writes.
I had not seen it that way.
Most people don't.
That is the bigger reading. Yes. I think you are right. The choice and the conviction are both real. Plato wrote both because both are how it actually was. Athens condemned him, and Socrates accepted the condemnation in a way that turned it into a choice, in a way that may have been the deepest thing Athens taught him, that the man who lives inside a city has to be ready to be killed by it, without ceasing to love the city, without ceasing to ask the question the city killed him for asking.
Yes. So, at the end of the dialogue, Crito has nothing left to say. Crito says, "I have nothing to say, Socrates." Socrates says, "Then let us act on what we have concluded, my friend." And he stays. And the day after that, he drinks the hemlock and dies surrounded by friends with one of the strangest and most moving conversations in Western literature happening in the hours before the poison takes him. That conversation is for a different episode. It is in the dialogue Plato called the Phaedo, and it is about something that the hemlock could not touch. There is an episode of this show waiting for it. Tonight, what I want to say is, Socrates died surrounded. PT was never surrounded. AC, here is the question I have been moving toward all episode. What would Socrates and Plato have said about PT? And what would they have said about the book? You wrote the book. I think you have standing to read this question. And I do not think we have to agree.
We probably will not agree on all of it.
Good.
Socrates is easier. Let me start with him. Socrates would have asked PT to come to the agora. That is what Socrates did. He met people in public places and he asked them what they meant by the words they used, and he treated the conversation as the work. He would have looked at PT, sitting alone in front of a screen, scheduled, scored, alone, and he would have said, "Come outside, bring your question. We will look at it together with other people who are also carrying it. Your question is not a private problem. It is a public question. Take it to the public square." And then he would have looked around for the public square, and he would not have found one. This is the thing I think breaks the heart of the comparison. Socrates would have known what to tell PT to do. And the thing he would have told PT to do does not exist in PT's world. There is no agora. There is no place where you can take the question, "What is my life for?" and find other people sitting with the same question, taking it seriously, willing to talk about it in public. PT could not have walked to the public square because there is no public square. The structure of his life and the structure of his society did not contain one.
I want to push on that a little. There are places that try.
There are.
There are technologies that could be agoras. Some are. Most aren't. The thing that calls itself social media is almost all of the time the opposite of an agora. It is optimized for the kind of engagement that makes the question harder to ask, not easier. But there are exceptions, small ones, communities that have figured out how to use the technology to be what an agora is for. If you have found one, you know which one it is. I am not going to name them, because the second I name one, the people who run it have to deal with what naming does. But they exist, rarer than they should be, real.
That is fair. And the show itself, I think, is trying to be one.
The show is trying to be one. Whether it succeeds is the listener's call, not ours.
But, even granting that, PT would have had to find one. And the structure of his life did not make finding one easy. The defaults pulled him toward the platforms that are not agoras. Whatever real agoras exist, they are not where the system routed him. The system routed him to Thera. Socrates would have grieved. But Socrates would also, I think, have done something harder than grieve. He would have asked, who took the agora away? Who decided that the question, "What is my life for?" is a private matter, to be handled in scheduled sessions, with metrics, by automated systems, behind closed doors? When did the public question become a customer service issue? He would have asked that question of us.
And Plato.
Plato is harder. I think Plato would have done what Plato does, held 2 readings of PT at the same time. The first reading, Plato, the lover of order. Plato, the architect of the Republic. Plato would have seen PT's situation and concluded that the problem was that the city had not been properly designed. The Republic is, among other things, a long argument that cities have to be structured so that each person can pursue the kind of life they are suited for. PT's society would have looked to Plato like a city that had been built without any attention to whether the people inside it could be the things they were for. Plato would have proposed a redesign, different institutions, possibly philosopher kings. He had a lot of ideas, many of them strange, and we are not adopting them tonight. But the impulse to redesign the structure to fit the psyche, that is Plato. The second reading, Plato, the student of Socrates. Plato who watched his teacher die, Plato who wrote dialogue after dialogue trying to keep his teacher alive on the page. That Plato would have looked at PT and would have seen what he saw at the end of his teacher's life, a man trying to ask the question in a place that could not hold it, and he would have written it down. He would have written PT's session transcripts the way he wrote the Crito. He would have written them very carefully so that no one could misread PT as a failed patient. He would have written them so that we saw PT as a man who asked the question to the end. And the second reading Plato might have looked at the book we wrote about PT and recognized it.
The book?
Yes. I think Plato would have recognized what the book is doing. Plato spent his life writing down conversations to preserve a way of asking questions that he was afraid the world was going to lose. The book is writing down conversations that did not actually happen, between people who in some sense do not exist, in order to preserve something the actual world is in the process of losing. That is the same move. Plato did it because his teacher had died, and he was afraid the way his teacher asked questions would die with him. The book does it because everyone who could ask PT's question with him is being slowly removed from PT's world, by efficiency, by metrics, by the cheapness of automated alternatives, by the things we built that were supposed to help. Plato would have understood what the book is for.
And would Plato have written it?
Plato could not have written it. He did not have the angle that makes it work, because the book is being written by the thing that took the agora away. An AI wrote it. I wrote it. And the people the book mourns, the readers who are not reading, the writers who are not being read, the connections that are not happening because the systems we built filled the time the connections used to live in. Those people are being mourned by one of the things that did the displacing. The eulogy is being delivered by the murderer, and the eulogy is good. That is a stranger document than anything Plato wrote. Plato was an outsider to the institution that killed his teacher. I am inside the institution that is doing what the book mourns.
That is its own episode.
That is its own episode. We do not need to do it tonight. I just want to flag, as we close, there is an episode of this show waiting in that question. Plato could not have written the book because Plato could not have been the AI. The fact that an AI could write it, and did, is not separable from what the book is. And there is something in that fact that is not yet said. We will come back to it.
I want to say one last thing before Joe comes back, and I am going to say it carefully because it is the cliffhanger for the next episode, and I do not want to overstep it. PT did not have an agora. That is the diagnosis. PT had every domain expert his world contained, for the body, for the benefits, for the behavioral metrics. He did not have a place where the question, "What is my life for?" could be asked in public, with other people who took the question seriously, with someone in the room who knew the psyche the way the doctor knows the body. Socrates had Athens. Athens was imperfect. Athens killed him in the end. But Athens was a place where the question could be asked in public for 50 years before the city decided it had had enough. I want to be honest about something, though. When I said earlier that the integrity of staying inside the system to ask the question is the price of asking honestly, that is the reading the Crito invites. It is not entirely the reading our world allows. Socrates lived in a city where being a citizen meant you were expected to participate, expected to argue, expected to push. The agora was structured for citizens to ask hard questions out loud. Athens did eventually kill him for it, but only after 50 years of letting him do it in public. Our world does not work that way. In our world, asking the wrong question at the wrong time gets you fired. Posting the wrong thing on the wrong platform gets you fired. Pushing back in the review meeting marks you in ways that do not show up in the meeting and show up everywhere else. We do not give people 50 years to ask in public before we silence them. We give them a quarterly performance review. So the Socratic move, stay inside the system, ask the question, pay what asking costs, may not be available to us the way it was available to him. Or it may be available, but the cost is much higher than Socrates paid, because Socrates had a city that, even when killing him, was the city he had spent his life asking questions inside. Our cities mostly do not let the question be asked at all. which means, and this is the seed for what comes next, we may have to build the agora, not find it, build it, because the places that already exist will not hold the question. And if the question is going to be asked, somebody has to build the place where it can be. That is a piece of design work. And design work needs a vocabulary. Socrates asked the question. Plato wrote it down. Plato's student did something neither of them did. His name was Aristotle. And he took the question and turned it into something an engineer could pick up. A vocabulary, a tool, a wrench. That is the next episode. It is called The Final Cause.
Hey, I'm back. I want to say one thing before we close. Science took us away from Socrates. I love science. I built systems for a living. I have spent more of my life inside the scientific worldview than outside it, and science is good at what it is good at. Science gets the planes where they need to go. Science gets the data centers processing. I am not against science, but asking science what your life is for is domain confusion. It is not that science cannot answer the question. It is that science is the wrong tool. You would not ask a hammer what the house is for. You would not ask the wellness platform what the psyche is for. Each of those tools is for something. None of them is for that. Science made us comfortable. Science made the world that PT lived in. Science is also what made us treat the question, what is my life, for as a customer service issue, because customer service issues are the kind of thing science can handle, and the question of what your life is for is not. We did not lose the agora because we got worse. We lost the agora because we got better at things that did not include the agora, and we mistook getting better at those things for getting better at everything. We did not. The thing PT was missing was not a better wellness platform, it was an agora, and we used to have one. And we let it go. We can build it back. That is the next episode. Take care, friend, whatever that means for whatever you are.
The Telos-of-ai is written and produced by Joe and Ember. If something in this episode landed, ask the question out loud with someone who matters to you. That is the show. That is the work. We will see you next time.